celebration of Palm Sunday begins the holiest week of the entire liturgical year, and so this is, of course, the beginning of quite a special occasion for us as we remember the supreme act of love and sacrifice that gave Jesus victory over death, and so by his act gave us victory over sin and death. And so the story of his life, and especially the story of his sacrifice, comes with many lessons for us to learn. And I think one of which, one of the maybe more important or the more confrontational of which we learn from his own words. And Jesus speaks these words on the very night before he was to die, and in my opinion, these are some of the most provocative words that Jesus says in all of the scriptures. As he advances in prayer at the Mount of Olives in the Garden of Gethsemane, he says that my soul is sorrowful even to death. Remain here and keep watch with me. He says this to Peter and James and John. And then he says, my Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me, yet not as I will, but as you will. Those words to me are not something that I would expect to come out of the voice of the one who created the universe. Not the words of the one who up until this point has always spoken with confidence, with power, with great certitude, with obvious knowledge about who he is, about what his mission is. One with knowledge as to what's going to happen even after this moment. He is aware that he is going to rise from the dead, that he is going to save the world. He has certainty about all of these things, and yet he still speaks these words. He reveals to us that he almost died of sorrow before he died of his crucifixion. So overwhelmed he was by the task, by the mission that was before him. Overwhelmed by the fear and the discomfort that he was being led to choose to move beyond. And that lesson is so crucial for us to learn if we are going to live the life of Jesus in us. Jesus reminds us very clearly in this passage and in the giving of his life that it is imperative that the mission that we have in life is going to include following where God leads us, even when we feel unable to do it. Why would God ever feel scared? Why would he ever be fearful? Why would he be sorrowful to the point of dying of his own sorrow? Because Jesus wanted to walk the steps that he knew all of us were going to walk as well. He allowed himself to go through this very same experience to remind us that he wasn't immune to anything that we were going to go through. But if Jesus allowed himself to be overcome by his fear, by the discomfort that he knew he was going to experience, the world would not have been saved. If Jesus succumbed to his fears, if Jesus looked to his own comfort, the world would not have been saved. And the love that existed in Jesus' heart for us caused him, impelled him to go beyond where his natural levels of desire would have taken him, his natural levels of confidence or joy would have taken him. He had to love in a self-sacrificial way by overcoming his fears. And if this was the life of Jesus, surely this is going to be the life of every Christian, because Jesus calls us to participate in the saving of the world, which means that the mission of your life and the mission of my life, upon our lives also, the salvation of the world depends. Because even though Jesus did this once for all in his own life, that salvation still needs to unfold in our days. And Jesus has willed that it also unfolds by our decisions, our free choice to follow him and to walk in his footsteps and to do as he did. And we are empowered to do this because we have the Spirit within us, which was the same Spirit that Jesus had within him. And it was the Spirit that Jesus had in his own soul that gave him the capacity to move beyond his discomfort, to move beyond his fear, to move beyond his natural inclination to avoid death, so that he could lay down his life and complete his mission. One of the great deceptions that all of us have in our journey of faith is to think that I will be ready to complete my mission. I will be holy as I am supposed to be holy. I will have all the tools necessary in order to follow God's will. And I'll know that to be true when I'm not afraid of anything anymore. When I feel like I'm completely confident to say like, yep, I know what God is asking me to do, and I can just charge forward, and I just know how it's all going to work out, and so I have nothing to be afraid of. After all, the Bible says, do not be afraid. That can reach all of us as a very subtle but a very deep temptation. Because the reality is that it's not true in Jesus' life, and so it's not going to be true in your life. Your life and my life is going to include fear. It's going to include walking up to the threshold and facing it with our own eyes. And to not be confused or deceived into thinking that I will be who I'm supposed to be when I don't fear anymore. Because if I wait for that moment, I will never complete my life's mission. And if Jesus was going to wait for that moment, he was never going to complete his life's mission. St. Paul reminds his brother Timothy at the opening of his second letter that God gave to us a spirit of power, not of fear. And just as it happened in Jesus' life, so it happens in our lives. That the Spirit gives us power, not by removing fear, but by overcoming fear. We will live our Christian lives not by removing all discomfort, not by removing all fear, not by removing all natural inclinations to what our limits are, but by meeting these head on and by overcoming them, by moving past them with the power of God within us. Everybody in this gospel story was going through fear. Jesus was going through it. Peter was going through it. The apostles were going through it. The Pharisees were going through it. The crowd was going through it. Pilate was going through it. Everybody was dealing with fear. And everybody except Jesus was being overcome by that fear and living in small-mindedness, which never serves the world. The only thing that really served the world was the one whose actions moved beyond that. To move beyond his own natural sense of limitation and take up the power of the Spirit that was within him. You see, the reality is this, that Jesus lived in this way and loved us in this way. And Jesus didn't live and love us in this way so that we wouldn't have to. Jesus loved us in this way so that we also would know how to.